Do you like that control?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I quite like the fact that we don't have that much control about it. We control what we do, we don't control what happens after that. And there are things we can all do to try to impact that and influence the success rate of our work, basing it on known problems, basing it on user research, following best practices, whatever the heck that means. And don't get me ranting about whatever that term means, which probably isn't very much at all. You can do the things you can do to try to impact it, but ultimately it's just up to Kilgore, the god of the A/B test, right? You have to worship the god, or he will smite you with the sample ratio mismatch and pray to him for the green result. He's a wise and benevolent god if you pray to him enough. Another interesting learning I always like to point out to people and like to talk about. I sat next to the team who were managing their search results page, and there was a UX designer there who built an interesting test. So the main link to click in the search results to click on the name of the hotel to go and see the hotel page was a classic sort of web text link, blue link with the underline. And this designer ran an A/B test to change it from a CSS underline to a 1 pixel bottom border. And the reality of that, as it's rendered in the browser, is that it's like 1 or 2 pixels further away from the text than the underline would be. And I remember talking to this designer, very talented designer, by the way, who I had a huge amount of respect for and still do, and said, "You can't be serious. You're running this as an A/B test. It's 1 pixel further away. It can't possibly make any difference." And then it went conclusively positive quite quickly and stayed that way for a couple of weeks, and it ended up getting shipped. And
What kind of prioritization frameworks do you like to use? What do you think is important?
I know there's a lot out there that people like to take off the shelf. There's the pie, rice, mice, slice, whatever they are. I'm not sure, there's loads of them. Personally believe no off-the-shelf framework is realistically going to get the job done for most people. And I actually think they aren't really intended to be implemented.
David Swinstead surfaced out of nowhere for me because suddenly he was there. He had 25 years of experience in building websites, 15 years of experience in experimentation, and I had never met him. A lot of people had never met him because he had been hiding inside the Booking.com bubble for decades. Currently, he works at the agency e-clerks, and he is running experimentation programs there. David, welcome. I wanted to ask you, is stand-up comedy helping you survive the experimentation space in any way?
Yeah, that's a funny question. I'm supposed to post on LinkedIn by now, something like I started doing stand-up and here's what it taught me about B2B software as a service, right? It's the other way around, if anything. It's the complete opposite, actually. It's, I think, doing a lot of experimentation and optimizing websites for so many years has taught me some of the skills to do stand-up. Well, still not very well, but I'm learning. It's going on stage and telling jokes. It's like doing A/B tests. It's just a data collection exercise, If you go on stage and tell a joke and it doesn't work, it's kind of, it hurts a little bit. People don't laugh, but you don't cry for every A/B test that doesn't work, right? You just know that 8 or 9 out of 10 aren't going to work, and you just take the 2 that do and you roll them out. Same with your jokes. If you do stand up, it's just a question of trying lots and lots of things. Doesn't mean, of course, that you just throw anything at the wall and see what sticks. You make an effort to write some stuff that's good, and then that time on stage is the A/B test.
And then that also means you have to kind of do a pre-post analysis because you have to do it once then and then another time. So then you kind of count the amount of laughs that you hear.
Yeah. Most people who know a lot about comedy will tell you not to obsess about it too much, not to maybe overanalyze. I am a bit guilty of overanalyzing, and I guess that comes from my experimentation background. I record everything. I watch every show back. I write down every single punchline and then rate people's laughter out of 5. And then I score those in a chess-like ELO ranking system, which is hideously overkill. And I'm probably overthinking this thing way too much. But it helps me feel like I have a little bit of control over something that otherwise is very sort of ethereal and in the air, and it's very hard to pinpoint what's going to work and what won't. And it gives me some fake feeling of control over the whole thing.
Do you like that control in experimentation programs as well, the way you're trying to control, well, kind of metrics in comedy?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I quite like the fact that we don't have that much control about it. We control what we do. We don't control what happens after that. And there are things we can all do to try to impact that and influence the success rate of our work, basing it on known problems, basing it on user research, following best practices, whatever the heck that means. And don't get me ranting about whatever that term means, which probably isn't very much at all. Uh, you can do the things you can do to try to impact it, but ultimately it's just up to Kilgore, the god of the A/B test, right? You have to worship the god, or he will smite you with the sample ratio mismatch and pray to him for the green result. He's a wise and benevolent god if you pray to him enough. So I kind of like the idea of surrendering to the process. You do what you can and know that you're following everything the correct way, and then what happens is what happens. But same for you as for everybody else.
Yeah, 100%. And David, imagine we have never met. Where could our listeners know you from? And is there any specific thing that you're exceptionally good at or that you're just ranting about on LinkedIn? Where can we know you from?
It's a good question. Yeah, how did you say at the beginning? I'd been hiding in a bubble or came out of nowhere after 25 years. Yeah, that's probably true. I wasn't very visible online for a long time because largely, yeah, I was in booking for 10 years, and I suppose I still had a lot to say to the world then, same as I do now. But I'd probably scratched that itch saying it a lot internally. And then after leaving booking, felt like I needed to scratch that a bit more and started posting on LinkedIn a lot more. And I guess that's how we met, and probably where most people know me from as well. It's either from LinkedIn or it's people who worked with me at booking in some capacity. And what was the second part? What am I ranting about a lot? Oh, obviously experimentation topics. I think most people who follow me on LinkedIn would say that I'm very heavily critical of AI, which is not necessarily true. I'm using it every day, as most of us are. I think I'm a bit critical of the overhype of what it can do, because it's not going to necessarily solve the energy crisis or world hunger or cure cancer, but it is a sycophantic chatbot who's always wrong. So that's something. It's useful, I guess, in some way. I'm ranting a lot on LinkedIn about busting a few myths that I like to rant about in the industry. People might want to scroll back and see me ranting about multi-arm bandits not being very useful, non-inferiority tests being not very useful.
It's been very enjoyable reading your rant, so I have to congratulate that on the work you're doing there. And I think it's really fun to follow you on LinkedIn. So I'll also add a link in the show notes to your LinkedIn profile. And David, what other than ranting makes you passionate about experimentation? What is it that kind of lured you into this?
It's a good question. When I started my career, I was a developer. Shout out to my friend Stuart, who I sat with him in his bedroom when we were 14, 15, and he taught me PHP and how to connect to a MySQL database. And we sat there and built our first website together. And some website where writers could go on and submit their work, and other people would read it and leave comments and feedback and reviews. I got featured in some national newspapers as website of the day or website of the week a couple of times. That was fun at 15. So then from there, I spent 10 years as a developer until I ended up at Dickies, or at least the UK subsidiary of Dickies Online, which is company in the US. It's mainly known as like skaters clothes, like Kino Marino wears them in this famous Deftones video. But in the UK, it's mainly known as workwear, like plumbers wear them. For the same reason as the skateboarders will wear them, it's because they have knee pads. And when I was there as a developer, I would never just want to build a thing. I would want to say, well, we built this and customers liked it for this reason. Diving into the analytics and saying to my boss, well, it seems like they kind of click it if they have more or less in their basket. Maybe they're ready to check out now. Maybe they're not, and stuff like this. And ultimately, he would come to me and say, okay, well, we just kind of fired the guy who was doing the online marketing. I don't think I need a new online marketing guy. I think I need a new developer, because it's pretty clear that you need to sort of move into that role, because this is the kind of stuff you're thinking about. And it was always more interesting to me, not just what we're going to build, but why we're going to build it. And it remains that way to this day, 20 something years later. And yeah, it's just, it's fascinating to me to look at the complexities of human behavior and how unpredictable they are, especially considering how predictable some people think they are. And then experimentation being a very humbling thing You know, I've been told so many times, and I've said many times, this is a no-brainer. We have to do this. And most of the time, it's not a no-brainer. My very first day at Booking.com, I landed in a team managing the checkout, or the booking process, as we called it. And I said to my designer on the team, the next button to proceed is on the left. Okay? People read from left to right. So like forwards should always be on the right. So that's a no-brainer. We have to change that. And he said, we ran that test last week and it completely tanked. So you are completely wrong. I mean, he was like, I thought the same. I ran the test. I agreed with you. It was a no-brainer, but I was wrong and you're wrong. So I just, I love this ability that we have all of these assumptions in our head, lots of things we might assume, but until the rubber hits the road, we really have no idea. And that's what really attracts me to it.
So was that also your first test, wanting to change the position of the button there at Booking?
It was my first suggested test at Booking, but they'd already run it. My first actual test there, not necessarily my idea, but something that my team built, was in the booking process. Whenever someone tried to exit, we'd pop up like a little thing saying, are you sure? Because you already entered data, which was interesting because a lot of people thought that was a dark pattern. And I can see why they would think that. If you're trying to leave and the website stops you from leaving, we sort of implemented it in such a way that it would only do this if you'd already started entering data. And not even like a Chrome autofill, but we detected a key press on one of the fields. They've typed data. It is reasonably justifiable that that user will not want to lose that data. So if we were popping this up for everyone who just tried to close it, I would say that probably is a dark pattern. But the fact that we really tried to limit it to this specific use case, I think made it a whole lot more justifiable. But still, it was a good one because that was my first test at Booking, and straight away a flavor for what happens a lot there. And then in a data-driven culture is pretty quickly someone's going to come and tap you on the shoulder and disagree with the decision you've made. And this was a real learning experience for me. The urge I had, and I think the urge a lot of people would have in that situation, is to defend your choice. Is to say, this is why we did it that way. I'm allowed to make this choice. It's my team. It's my decision. Go away. Why are you saying this to me? Completely wrong, of course, right? This is somebody who's taken time out of their day to come and give you some feedback, and feedback is a gift. And instead of the urge to push back and say, no, we're right, what about maybe you aren't right? Maybe they are, and maybe they at least have a point. And instead of go away, maybe it's, okay, hang on, come to the room with me, talk with me. Let's hear what your objections are. Why do you think this? Do you see something in the data?
And the point you were making was about the dark pattern, or was it about
exactly
something else?
that.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, this notion that we pop up, not just like a floating div or something, but like a real like JavaScript alert. So we like physically block the user closing the page. They said it's a dark pattern. And yeah, when I explained it's only because it's only when they've entered data, they sort of said, okay, that's better, but still not great. Yeah, we take that feedback on board, right? And then we retest it, and then we put it into user research, and we ask people what they think about it, and we take all these extra steps because somebody flagged it. And I think that was a very, very interesting experience to have as my first experiment at Booking, for sure.
And was that the case from the beginning, that you guys would think about what is a dark pattern, what is ethical, what is not? That sounds like it was always there.
I didn't first hear the term dark pattern until a few years after that, but yes, it was always part of the consideration for sure. There was then, this was early 2015, I think I joined Booking. Yeah, that's right, yeah. And there was a very bottom-up culture then. I think Martin was telling you a while ago that it started off as a very top-down, and then it became bottom-up, and now became more top-down. So when I was there in 2015, it was very, very much bottom-up, extremely. The feedback from the chief product officer was increased conversion. And that was about it. And there were some talks of flywheels and stuff, but it was how you do that, up to you, increase conversion. So along with that comes this kind of democratization of the process. So you can do something in your team and you're completely empowered to do that, but so can all the teams around you. And there's this culture then of people coming over and saying, well, hang on, but what about what you're doing? Because that's not the same thing we're aiming at. And then that means there's a lot of people who will come and give you this kind of feedback. And it's really important to accept it, I think.
Yeah, wow, interesting. Indeed, I spoke to this to Maarten as well, who was also a guest in the podcast, and it's really good to hear that at Booking, you guys, you've seen a lot of flavors top down then as well. While in most companies, this is not the case. And did you also make any mistakes that we or the audience here can potentially learn from?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess well, I don't want to say it again because I already alluded to it, right? But I think the biggest mistake I made in those early days was to push back on people and to say to defend myself too much. The urge to take it as a personal criticism, almost an attack, and to push back a lot and say, no, we've done it like this because we're allowed, or we've done it like this because the decision said this, and this is the instruction I was given, and I think it's the biggest mistake a lot of people can make is being a bit too quick to defend themselves rather than taking on board why am I getting this feedback and actioning it perhaps.
Is there any other interesting learning from Booking.com that you can share that we can learn from? For example, I know there are some famous examples about holdout test. Is there anything like that you can share to teach us?
The holdout test was really interesting. Yeah. Uh, this is the one where there was a bunch of copy tests that have been run over time, and some people were starting to. I guess there were people close to it, like Lucas, Erin, and probably some other people you've had on here or will in the future, I'm sure, who were running these experiments and getting results that just didn't quite seem right. And I think the most talked about one internally was the primary CTA on the rooms table to select a room was changed from book to I'll book, which is kind of clunky, weird grammar. Certainly in English. I'm not sure in other languages maybe it makes a bit more sense. And even the copywriter who did the test was sort of thinking, I was like 99.9% conclusive. It feels weird, right? And then people start to think, even if it does convert more, do we want that to be live? Should there be some question of a decision to be had about how we want our products to look, regardless of conversion? Maybe. So it got people talking a lot about, well, maybe it's just a false positives, or maybe the tool isn't correct in some way. Maybe it's tracking, I don't know, could be tracking a lot of bots or which skews it, or it could be not splitting 50-50, which skews it. And so all this work was done to sort of revalidate those. Um, so yeah, Lucas and a few others who worked with him punched a few of those tests together, reran them all as one. So it was all of the things that were successful. I think, I'm not sure how many, maybe it was 5 or 10 or something like that, where base was all of them off and variant was all of them on. And they couldn't get any consistent results on most of them because they did do splits as well. Like it was a series of experiments. It was a project. It wasn't just one, right? But the one thing that did consistently keep performing was this I'll book. And so everyone sort of had to grit their teeth a little bit and smile and say, oh, I guess it stays then, because it really does seem to consistently increase conversion.
Is it still there today?
Oh, that's a good question. It was last time I looked a while ago, but I haven't looked for a while, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. You could let it go.
But to another interesting learning I always like to point out to people and like to talk about, I sat next to the team who were managing their search results page, and there was a UX designer there who built an interesting test. So the main link to click in the search results to click on the name of the hotel to go and see the hotel page was a classic sort of web text link. Blue link would be underlined. And this designer ran an A/B test to change it from a CSS underline to a 1 pixel bottom border. And the reality of that, as it's rendered in the browser, is that it's like 1 or 2 pixels further away from the text than the underline would be. And I remember talking to this designer, very talented designer, by the way, who I had a huge amount of respect for and still do, and said, you can't be serious. You're running this as an A/B test. It's 1 pixel further away, but it can't possibly make any difference. And then it went conclusively positive quite quickly and stayed that way for a couple of weeks, and it ended up getting shipped. And I still remember this, and I talk about this a lot when somebody comes to me now and tells me, we're just going to roll this thing out because this thing can't possibly make a difference. I told them 1 pixel further away on an underline made a difference. So it can. everything you want to change on your site can make a difference. The only question is, how much traffic do you have to detect it? How willing are you to detect it? Maybe how important it is to roll this thing out anyway strategically. But somebody did tell me something the other day. They rolled out a change and said, it's not big enough to make a difference. I said, A, it is. B, then why did you prioritize it if it's not big enough to make a difference? So I think, yeah, Booking.com taught me that for sure. But everything can make a difference, even 1 pixel.
Especially if you have a lot of traffic, of course.
That's the thing, yeah. It will make a difference on less traffic, but you won't be able to detect it. But if you have enough to detect it, you probably should.
And how can it be that the people that you just named, you named Lucas Vermeer, you named Erin Weigel, which also kind of have become personal brands in the space and experimentation, but how can it be that those people are so open to experimentation? Is it something also about the hiring that Booking.com did to find the right people, or was it really the culture that you guys built, or is it the things you learned along the way that kind of opened you up and humbled you in a sense to experimentation? What do you think is that culture?
All of those things, yeah.
Everything.
Hiring for sure, culture for sure. There's a quote Erin loves to say. It's not hers. I forget who the quote is by exactly, but the quote is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So culture is hugely important. Somebody can stand on a stage and say, we're aiming at this thing and this is what we're going to do. But if that isn't really gelling with the company culture, then it isn't necessarily going to happen. So culture was a big part of it. When I joined was, I think, just after or just around the time Lucas took over the experimentation team from Jonas. And so I think a lot of that culture was already there before I joined, but for sure it grew and burgeoned after that and blossomed as with a large thanks to Lucas, of course. And hiring as well for sure. Yeah, I was at one point I was doing 2 or 3 product owner interviews per week. And one of the main things we're checking for is a data-driven mindset. And is this person humble? Can they admit when they're wrong? Can they surrender themselves to data? Can they follow customer learnings even when they might be counterintuitive?
So what do you ask
really,
to figure this out?
it's a classic. It's the star model. You know, it's the star model that you interview people with: situation, task, action, result. Can you tell me about a time when you had this kind of difficulty, and what happened? What did you do? How did that? What impact did that have on the results and stuff like that? So it's not reinventing the wheel, but then really listening to what they say about. Were they wrong about something, or were they quick to admit that? Or if you point out and say, oh, wait, you haven't thought about this, are they going to say that's not important? Or are they going to say, oh yeah, maybe I haven't thought about it, something like that? And that was really key. And of course, data analysis is an obvious one that companies are going to check for, but I like to think that we were a bit hotter even on that than most people were. I remember being told so many times by people in an interview that for this A/B test, I'm going to measure time on page as a metric. And I would always ask them, is up good or is down good? Oh, up is good. Why? Oh, because it shows they were interested or confused. Yeah, okay. And then someone says down is good. And why is down good? Oh, because they found it faster. Yeah, or they were less interested, right? It could be either of those things, and we don't know. So I think a lot of people in a lot of companies would let that kind of slide. I think in Booking, we were a bit hotter on saying, well, hang on a minute. It's sort of surface level. It's their way of saying you're analyzing data. But no, like, I really need you to show me that you've thought this through properly. And the hiring process was quite intense. We would do some remote interviews, and then you bring them in for a full day, even if they're in, I don't know, Egypt or whatever. You fly them over and you put them in a hotel for a day and you bring them over. And it was a pretty intense process, although nowadays I think people are doing even more. But that was a big part of it for sure. Lucas talked about this a while ago. Somebody, I think possibly Shiva, was asking him, because there's this correlation between data-driven culture and experimentation culture and companies that are very successful. Is it a causation? And of course, Lucas, because he's Lucas, says, we don't know that. Right? We can't possibly say that for sure. And of course, that's true. We cannot, but it seems like a very strong correlation to the point where it would almost imply causation. And of course, we like to think that is the case.
And now that you have also seen other experimentation programs, Is there also something you can do to build culture? Can you invent rituals? Can you work in a certain way? What can you do if you want to create that culture that facilitates experimentation if there is a causation or even a correlation?
Yeah. Anyone who's worked with me at any time in the past 10 years will have heard me say probably about 10 or 20 times, maybe 10 or 20 times a month. A CRO is easy. People are hard, and change management is hard. So the first thing you need to do when you go into an organization or even just joining a team that's already mature is not just go in and try to start changing things, because it's going to ruffle people's feathers, it's going to get people's backs up. Culture is something you have to build gradually over time. It doesn't happen by standing on a stage and saying, think like this, because that's not how people work, right? It happens with repetition. It happens with consistency. It happens by leading by example very consistently over time. So it doesn't work that I would just, or anybody would stand on a stage and tell people what the culture should be. You have to live it. You have to breathe it. And it takes time to build as well. People don't see, read an article or a book or watch a video or watch a presentation and change their minds like that. It's a gradual thing. You adjust to a culture. You might even say indoctrinate, although not necessarily the most positive word. But yeah, I think breeding culture is important, of course, but it takes time and it can't be rushed and it has to be done a little bit gently.
How much time does it take?
Yeah, facetious answer, of course. How long's a piece of string? But at least months, not days or weeks.
I would say years.
At least months, yeah, potentially years. I mean, in a small team, shorter time. In a bigger org, longer time. And how strong was the culture before that they have to push back against? Do you have leadership support, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? But at least months, potentially years.
100%. And you also said something about, okay, you can actually change a pixel, change an underline, and it will change the behavior of your visitors if you can measure it. But you also said something about prioritization there. You also said, like, yeah, if you don't think this will work, how could it have ever end up high in your prioritization framework or the way you work? What kind of prioritization frameworks do you like to use? What do you think is important?
I know there's a lot out there that people like to take off the shelf. There's the pie, the ice, rice, mice, slice, whatever they are. I'm not sure. There's loads of them. I personally believe no off-the-shelf framework is realistically going to get a job done for most people. And I actually think they aren't really intended to be implemented. The pie, I forget what it is. Something impact and effort. What's the P? I forget, but it doesn't matter. Uh, these are really good as examples of how to show people this is the kind of framework you should do. You should have some criteria. You, with your team, score that criteria, add it into a sum, sort low to high, as a high to low, and that's your framework. But just these three things that someone chose as an example are not going to work necessarily for me in my org or for you in your org, and they're certainly not going to work the same. Every team is different. Every company is different. To quote Craig Sullivan, every org is different and they're all messy. So it's really important.
What do you do?
Yeah, so I always build something in quote marks bespoke for every team that I'm in, and it's based on the things around us. I say bespoke in quote marks. In reality, it's some version of something I've taken with me for many years, but I will take that as a basis and then look at the situation I'm in and say, okay, in this situation, for example, it's not only difficult building the tests, it's difficult getting people to agree on these tests with all the stakeholders. So that's something we have to prioritize as well. So then we have to rate each test idea, each ticket on not only how long to build, but how long to align on this as well. Is it a low, medium, or a high? How much difficulty are we anticipating with this?
And do you then score it lower if it takes more time to align with everyone? Is speed important here?
Speed is one of the factors, right? And I think prioritization in a sense is the heart of the program, because anything that somebody might have a question about, any kind of concern or critique somebody might raise, almost all of them, the answer is somewhere hiding in your prioritization framework. A stakeholder might come along and say, you aren't really trying to tackle these big strategic ideas. You're focusing too much on these small steps. And then the question probably alludes to the fact that you might not have got strategic alignment as one of your prioritization criteria, and you probably should. If you already have, maybe you need to change the weighting on that a little bit. If somebody comes along and says you're moving too slowly, why your team not having enough output? Probably alludes to the fact that you haven't got a size of build in there, which you probably have because that's basic, but then more likely you haven't got the size of how long it takes to actually align these, and that's blocking everything and taking more effort. You need that in there as well. If you're still getting this feedback, you probably need to change the weighting on that a little bit, so it's more important. If you're getting feedback that says your success rate is too low, well, first of all, what does that even mean? Because I would say a test is successful if it gets shipped or if you learn something from it. But okay, let's not be a little bit facetious. But success rate means shipped test, right? So if your success rate is too low, it probably just means you haven't got your evidence factored in there highly enough. All those frameworks, by the way, all those off-the-shelf frameworks typically expect people to estimate impact. Oh, well, wouldn't that be nice? If we could do that, we wouldn't be A/B testing, would we? If we could just wave a magic wand at a screen and say, this one's 1% impact, this one's 2% impact, wouldn't that be nice? But then I'd be out of a job, so maybe it wouldn't be so nice after all. We're all here doing these jobs because we cannot now. So I've seen teams I've worked with in the past who have told me, these are all our impact estimations for these tests. And look, they were right, because look at all these successful ones. And look, we knew that one would be right. We said there was a high impact on it. And then when you ask to look at the full backlog and everything they estimated up front beforehand, you actually realize they estimated high impact on everything. But they're just pointing at the ones that were successful and saying, oh, look, I told you I was right. Some kind of like Texas sharpshooting confirmation bias. But we don't know. Or even teams who are convinced that they know, when you really look at the data, they don't. So I think all those frameworks are bad because they're not bespoke to the company and because they ask you to estimate something that cannot be estimated accurately. My previous manager asked me to go through all my tickets and estimate the impact. And I tried to explain to him I can't do that. And he insisted. So I said, okay, here's a spreadsheet with the estimated impact. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Because I know that 8 or 9 out of 10 of these are not going to succeed. So if you're forcing me to estimate an impact for each one, the only realistic evidence I have to estimate is that most of them are going to be 0. Obviously, some aren't. I don't know which ones those are going to be.
Yeah, but do you use insights like UX research or data as pre-validation in prioritization frameworks?
Yeah, so that's why I like to make sure as much of my prioritization criteria are based on actuals rather than...
Yeah, I see.
So impact, I don't have impact. I have traffic size and I have evidence level. Is it a lot of traffic? And evidence is how sure am I that this is going to be positive or not? And it's not based on event. It's called evidence. And we ask people to rate. We do it as a team. We have some like little tool that we use. Everyone votes on it, and then we flag if somebody voted massively different from somebody else. But it's all based on how much evidence. And then, of course, that's the equivalent of people estimating impact, right? You can't estimate impact. You can just have a rough guess. How sure are we that this solves a problem and is a valid solution to that problem, and multiply that by your traffic size. And essentially, that's what I do instead of completely making up an impact out of nothing.
So what is the base of your prioritization then? So imagine you come to work with me tomorrow on a client, and we'll be having fun, but we're also going to implement a prioritization framework. Which are the elements that must be in there according to you, David?
Yeah, so it's traffic size, and important to note again, actuals. It's not just low, medium, high based on what people feel. You should be saying as much as possible scaled to your organization, of course. Low means whatever, 0 to 5,000 visits a week, something like that. That would be very low, I guess, but maybe test. Medium means 5 to 10. High means 10 to 100, whatever it might be. Scale to your organization, scale to your conversion rate, scale to whatever makes sense. So traffic size got to be in there. Strategic alignment has to be in there. Difficulty of building in terms of the effort to actually build and the effort to actually align this thing as well and get people on board with it. Those are the main things. Evidence level, I said, of course, already. Depending on what kind of testing you're doing, if it's the kind of front-end testing that a lot of people are doing in optimizing VW and want to take whatever JavaScript that fires on DOM load, you're going to have a flicker effect. and where you see base for whatever it might be. Could be half a second, could be 2 or 3 seconds or more. And depending on what you're doing, that might be a strong flicker effect. It's going to skew the results. I do prioritize that as well. I have that as one of my criteria. If it's something that's halfway down the page, then it won't have much of a flicker effect because the page is already loaded before people see it. If it's behind a panel, someone has to open a filter panel. Not much of a problem there. But if it's really changing the page after someone's already seen it, I call that a rug pull, then that's going to go down my priority pretty hard.
Have you seen evidence of that the flicker effect actually impacts metrics in an A/B test?
I've seen user research where people are quite taken aback by it. I've seen where people are already trying to click something and it moves and they go, what the heck was that? The classic, the core web vitals will call it, what is it, cumulative layout shift. When you're trying to click things and things are moving, typically it happens because there are modals and ads flying everywhere, but it also happens because A/B tests are firing stuff very, very annoying. I haven't seen it in metrics because you wouldn't, of course, you wouldn't see it in metrics. You would just see that the test isn't doing very well and you would have no idea why, which is why it's a big problem.
Yeah. And this is your full framework, David. It's traffic size, it's strategic alignment, it's difficulty to build either dev or to get it aligned, it's evidence level, and then it's flicker effect. This is like the base for you.
That's the flicker effect I added in just in the last year or so, but that's basically what I've been using for a long time, but always changing the weightings depending on where I am, right? Because that's the biggest part of why I don't like those off-the-shelf frameworks. It's not that PI and E are the wrong things. It's that there cannot be a right thing for everyone. It depends on the team you're in and the difficulties you're facing. So I stick with the basic same things I'm trying to prioritize on, but the weighting of those scores changes.
Is there never a good reason to use an off-the-shelf prioritization framework?
Never is a strong word, isn't it? A very strong word. There's an element of if you're just getting started, if it's the first test you ever ran, it's probably better than nothing. It's probably better than vibes-based or hippo-based. But maybe it gets you started. But I do think people should try to move on past it quite quickly.
Yeah, no, 100%. I wanted to suggest that sometimes having any prioritization is better than none, and then you build, maybe years later you can change to something more complex. But sometimes that first step can be so hard. So
we could talk about that concept in a lot of things as well. Statistical rigor and like the strictness of an experimentation program is really, really important when you're booking.com. And if you get a 0.8% conversion uplift of a test, that's millions of euros.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Right. Probably even depending on if it's the whole traffic or just some subset or whatever, it could be tens of millions of euros per year. But most people aren't dealing with that, right? So it's very easy for some people to say we must focus on more statistical rigor, but some people are just getting started. And there's an heuristic out there that some people bounce around online. I think it might come from Ronnie Koharvey. He says that if you don't have at least 200,000 visitors in an A/B test in whatever period you're willing to run it, then it's not worth running. And I think maybe if you work out the MGE on that, I think I checked, it was around 2.5%, something like that. But most websites in the world don't have that kind of traffic, right? Like 90-something% of websites in the world don't have that traffic. So what are those people supposed to do? Just sit and stare at it and not optimize, right? There has to be some level of, we can say that this is the best thing and the best way to work, sure, but what about the people who can't and the people who are just getting started? So the same as with the prioritization framework. Yes, make it better as much as you can. And the more you improve it, there will be benefits. But something is better than nothing. And starting somewhere is very useful. And I think people maybe underrate that a little bit.
100%. What do you think happens to an experimentation program where there is no prioritization? So if people don't do it, what happens?
I guess that's not an experimentation program, is it? That's just that's hippo. That's just the antithesis of that. And probably what happens then is people just roll out things for whatever reason they like. And what is it they say? People like to say experimentation is slow. They don't do experimentation because it's slow. What that typically means is if I'm not experimenting, I just roll out a lot more stuff. And I don't prioritize and I don't test. And it's not quite what you asked. You didn't say if they're not testing. You said if they're not prioritizing, but I'm kind of conflating those as the same thing. I'm kind of assuming if they're not doing any kind of prioritization, then probably they're not really testing properly either.
Yeah, so you think if there's no prioritization, they also don't take statistics seriously, for example?
I would imagine so, yeah. And the problem, of course, is when people say it's slow. Well, what's the slowest way to improve your product is to roll out a lot of stuff that doesn't work, and you don't even know it doesn't work because you didn't test.
Yeah.
So you might feel like you're doing an awful lot, but you're not doing very much at all. It feels faster, but you're probably just treading water. You might be going backwards, in fact, quite a bit as well. So it's people can do that, and I also think it's important sometimes to not catastrophize. Somebody's launching a one-line copy experiment, or even just rolling out one-liner copy, and there will be people who say, "No, it's terrible. It might be so bad, and we're not even testing it, and it's going to sink the company." It's probably not. It's probably going to have 0.something% impact on conversion, and maybe better for all our mental health if we relax a little bit. So even if people aren't testing every little thing, we're not testing cancer medication. You don't have to be so strict with everything all the time. But yeah, it's obviously better if you do.
Well, thanks so much, David. And what if people want to learn more from you? Where can they follow you? Where can they learn from you?
On LinkedIn, for sure. David Swinstead on LinkedIn. If you're in or around Amsterdam, come see me not be very funny at the stand-up show.
Yeah, come to your stand-up show. Do you talk about experimentation in your stand-up shows or not?
I would love to. I'm afraid it's not really the crowd for it.
Right.
Nothing more than to sit there and write a whole bunch of jokes about the topics I'm really passionate about. But unless I'm going to do a stand-up set at a conversion conference, then I don't think people are going to really understand it very well, to be honest.
I mean, I would love to see that show. So,
we'll talk to Ton.
Yeah, talk to Ton. Anyways, thanks so much, David, for joining us today. It was great to talk to you, and I will share your link to your LinkedIn profile in the show description. Thanks.